Good afternoon. I'm Vern Morrison, for the next 29 hours at least, I'm the Digital Production Unit Coordinator of the library.
Hi, I'm Hannah Pearson. I am our Collection Management and Acquisitions Librarian.
Hi, I'm Ben Richards, and I'm the Business and Communication Librarian.
Oh, Yu-Tsung, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm Yu-Tsung Shen, Head of Cataloging.
Okay, so our presentation is called Library Licensed Textbooks, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And this is supposed to be a discussion, so we have some polls throughout, but if you have any comments you'd want to just throw into the chat, or you can even unmute and jump in if you have anything to add. We really hope that this is kind of introduces ideas that inspires discussion. So speaking of polling, we're going to try to use Poll Everywhere for today. So I'm going to put this link in the chat if you want to participate. Or you can also use your phone to participate. This is just a chance for us to hear a little bit more about what's going on your campus. So as you all try that, I'm going to go to the first question, and this will let us know if it's working. Okay, we have some answers already. So we're wondering, does your library currently include library ebooks as a part of your affordability efforts? And if you'd rather just use the chat, that's fine too. Looks like most of our participants do already. A few plan to, but don't currently, and a few that are not sure. Okay, and in the chat, another person whose library does. Okay, so that's good news, because we'd love to hear from those who already do and just kind of compare programs or talk about how this works or doesn't work on our various campuses. All right, so just to give you an introduction to our campus, our program is called Affordable Learning at Cleveland State University. And our program started in 2014, so quite a while ago now. We were actually one of the first members of what was then the Open Textbook Network, but is now the Open Education Network. We're one of the first 7 members. So we got involved very quickly. And ever since then, we've been offering small grants for adoption, adaptation, or creation of OERs every spring and fall semester since 2014. So it's a lot of faculty. We have a conservative estimate that we've saved students over $800,000 at this point. And then last year, we expanded to also offer a textbook affordability summer symposium with help from our OER committee, which is a cross-departmental committee. The symposium was meant to have an educational component, so we teach faculty who participate about open education. They have to review an OER, and they have to commit to adopt an OER as at least an optional resource for their students. And there's also an advocacy component to that as well. We also work with the Student Government Association on our campus to offer a Textbook Hero Award. So the students choose the award, and they try to pick a faculty member who has, based on nominations, student nominations, a faculty member who has really gone above and beyond in promoting affordability in course materials for students. And then we offer an annual regional conference, and I think we've done 4 now. It's called OpenCon Cleveland. It's kind of a mini, a regional version of the big international OpenCon conference. It's much smaller, but we kind of engage our colleagues in the area of Northeast Ohio in the topic of open education, and we have speakers and breakout sessions and things like that. But in our library and some of our everyday work, we do a lot to support affordability, and that's our focus today. We're going to talk about, we have a textbook center where we have required print textbooks. We collect ebooks, as we're going to talk about, and we also have electronic course reserves for other library licensed content. So just to clarify, and this is not an idea that I came up with, I've actually seen it, I think, in one other session here at the Michigan OER Summit. But we kind of look at our efforts as a spectrum of affordability. So we focus our efforts on open educational resources because they allow for the most flexibility for faculty to meet learning outcomes and for students to participate in the creation of their course material and open pedagogy and that sort of thing. But that isn't always available for every faculty member, as you all probably know very well. Sometimes there just isn't a resource that exists for a certain subject, or what exists is not meeting the faculty members' needs. So we look at other options. We look at library licensed content, which students are already paying for. So we want to really take advantage of those resources. And that's where we'll focus today. We also look at free online content, which could go away and may not be openly licensed, but is still saving students money. And then we look at inclusive access and other kind of bookstore driven affordability efforts as another option to at least bring the cost down for students. So this is just to say that we certainly do prioritize open education, and it's a big part of our efforts. But that's we're focusing on the library licensed content in this presentation today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Vern and then Yue Tsung to talk about how we go about obtaining required textbook lists from the bookstore so that we can begin to make e-textbooks available to our students. So I'll turn it over to Vern.
Thank you. Well, the process starts by my sending an email to Jacob Thompson, the manager of the campus bookstore, which is called Viking Outfitters, and asking him to please send us a list of required textbooks for the upcoming semester. Typically, I do this about 3 or 4 weeks before the start of the semester. And by that time, they have probably 75 to 85% a complete list of what's going to be required in the fall. So I will ask him again with about a week or two to go in the semester, by which point the list should be pretty much finalized. And he sends me within a day or so an Excel file, which is of very little use to me at that point. The file that he gives me, I couldn't do anything with without the magic and the skill of my colleague Yue Tsung, who runs it against our holdings in our online holdings in our catalog, and she'll tell you about that process now.
Yeah. Use bookstore textbook list to match serious holdings. My talking will focus on technical steps. Next slide, please. And first, I get the bookstore's spreadsheet list from Vern Morrison, course reserve coordinator. And then I use this list to find the ISBN's column from the sheet. You can see that probably is not clear, but there is a column. Next slide. Then I copy ISBN column, paste to an Excel file. Generally, I can get around 3,000 ISBNs. And then from this screen, you can see I go to Excel file, home, click home, and then click conditional formatting. Next, highlight cells rules, and then click dedupe values. That's very important. Generally, I got probably near half after dedupe. And then I go to data here, and then I go to remove duplicates. So I got 16,000 around generally. Summer semester generally is less. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. And then I open Notepad++, copy ISBNs, unique ISBNs from Excel file, and paste them to Notepad++. And then I use regular expression. You can, from the screen, you can see find what. How do I do? And replace with. That's the Sierra need this format. Please don't forget click regular expression at the bottom every time. Next step, next slide. And the result looks like this after running. Then remove the last part, square bracket, curly bracket, comma, something like this, the yellow part, you can see. You need to move that. Next slide. And then I put the query in the JSON. Just go to Sierra, open Boolean search using JSON. Something like the screen like this in Sierra. Next slide. I want to show you the bigger one. You can see the query like this. Every time I just copy the ISBNs, replace this the yellow part. 16,000 ISBNs, no, there is no problem with that number. Next slide, please. And then I paste. And then I got the result, export the records matched. Generally, I create apply saved export like this. So I don't need every time to do this field by field. Next step, next slide, please. And then I export the search result to save as an Excel file. Sometimes I double check OCLC batch load ISBN to match the records. Because sometimes I received if less than 100 titles, I do this. If more than 100, generally I don't do that. Our library holdings sometimes doesn't, especially for electronic, doesn't match OCLC holdings because we use WordShare collection management to manage automatically update our holdings. So that's why I sometimes search OCLC. Okay, I give to next person.
Okay, thanks. Could you get back to this previous slide before we look at this one, please? Thanks. Okay, so what Yusung sends me is an Excel file that looks like the one you're looking at now. This is from the summer semester, so enrollment obviously is down in the summer. There aren't as many titles, but in the B or C column of the Excel file, there will be a URL and of the ones that we have electronic access to. So those are the ones I need to concern myself with. For summer, there were maybe, I don't know, 40 or 45 of these titles. For the upcoming semester, there are 110 of them and counting. That number grows probably every day. As I said, I've asked the bookstore to send the revised list and they've done that, but it might be prudent to ask for even more revised lists like the week before the semester starts, which is in what, 3 weeks? Okay, I'm ready for the next slide, I guess. Thank you. What we then do is set up something. We use a platform called SpringShare. I don't know how many of you use SpringShare to work with your library web pages, but we use SpringShare to, among other things, run our electronic course reserves module. And each semester we create a listing saying ebooks, electronic editions of required textbooks for whatever semester. And we sort of have to trick SpringShare into listing this first alphabetically so it shows up at the top. And we do that by putting some hidden ASCII keys, ASCII characters in front of the first word to make it pretend. And so it's like, oh, okay, I'll put this first alphabetically. Took a while to figure out how to do that, but once we did, it worked splendidly. So you have a list of every course arranged alphabetically by course number that has one or more required texts. And as I say, in this semester, there's about 110 of them. And if you click on a given folder, which I don't have a slide for, but if you click on the first one, whatever that says, ACT 496, et cetera, this happens to be a course that it's cross-listed across several different disciplines. If you click on that, it opens up a folder which shows you, it opens up the title of the book that's available as an ebook. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. And if you click on that title, it takes you to the Scholar, our online catalog Scholar record for that book. And it gives the title, author, publisher, all that. And then in the middle of the screen, it'll be a connect to URL with at least one way of connecting to that resource. Sometimes there are more than one way. And if you click on that, which again, I don't have a slide for, do I? This is the only slides I have, right? It's the first two, okay. But basically that opens up another box with a hyperlink to the actual book on whatever platform it is, EBSCO or what have you, and it will connect to the electronic resource that way. And obviously these vary from platform to platform as well. Sometimes you can click on it and you get access to the book for the entire semester. Sometimes you can only get at 100 pages at a time or whatever limit it is. But there's at least one way to access the entire text of the book through this system. And there's some redundancy built into it too. The slide that you saw before this one is a master list of, thank you, of every course that has one or more required text available as an ebook, but also on the electronic course reserves page. Again, there's no slide for this. There's a separate folder for every class that has anything at all on electronic course reserve, whether it be journal articles, chapters of books, links to streaming video, what have you. So the redundancy takes a lot of my time in the beginning of the semester to set it up, but it's worth it because it gives the students different ways to access the material. They may not want to look at this ebooks list. They might just want to go to the electronic course reserve listing for, Psych 302 or whatever it is and click on that, and that'll show them all the resources available to them electronically, not just the ebook. And we keep pretty good statistics about this. Every week I run a report showing how many hits we got on each ebook title in the previous 7 days. I do it from Sunday to Sunday. And I provide those statistics to our director, our associate director, and to several of the people in this presentation and elsewhere too, so they can keep track of how successful this initiative is. And it's pretty successful. We get a lot of hits, and we get more and more with each semester as the faculty get acclimated with it. They're very eager to pick up on this. Obviously, some faculty members more than others, but the ones who are eager about it actively promote it among their students, and they share this with them. That's another part of what I do, is send out an email to all the faculty with at least one book on this list to tell them, hey, there's one of the required texts for accounting 495 or whatever is available as an ebook, and here's how to access it. And then they in turn pass that information on to the students. The key to this is to get this done before the first day of classes, ideally at least a week before, so they can incorporate it into their syllabi if they want to. And we've been pretty successful at doing that the last couple of years, especially now that I've been working with this for a while. I've got the procedures down pretty well. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, and I'm not saying the way I do it is necessarily the way you should do it, or the way my successor will do it once I retire. But this is what we do, and it works pretty well. Okay, I'm done.
Guess I should unmute myself. But I'm Ben Richards. I'm going to talk about a little more work that we do with the bookstore. So after we get the list of books up on the website and emails get sent out to faculty, letting them know that they have a book that's available electronically, it's kind of in the students' hands, and we hope that students get that information. But this summer, we finally worked out a solution with the bookstore in cooperation with them to send the list back to the bookstore of our matches, and then have the bookstore populate their website with information about where there is a match. So if we go to the next slide, someone who's checking to see what their required texts are for a course that has a match will see a section note that says this text may be available as an ebook in the Michael Schwartz Library or for a 2-hour loan at the library's textbook center. So this appears on individual sections of courses. We can go to the next slide, please. But it's going to be new this semester, so we think it's a good thing. It's an extra channel of information that students have to let them know that there are sometimes textbooks available through the library and that we should check. The bookstore is really the definitive source of information about required texts on campus. And now there's integration, some sort of integration between the bookstore and the library on the bookstore's end. And what's I think really exciting is that students will get this information a little bit earlier than the first day of class, when their professor gives them the syllabus or tells them you can get your book through the library. Students who do check with the bookstore will be alerted that, oh, I should go find the library's website, or I should walk over to the library and ask about, this potential to get a textbook. It's not perfect. Students aren't going to know a semester in advance or when they're enrolling in a course that they have an affordable option, but it gives them, 2 weeks or 1 week ahead of time for them to make a decision if they want to buy a book. Introducing print reserve into this does come with its own set of problems. So we need to account for the fact that print reserve books sometimes go missing, or books in our textbook collection do go missing. So there's some data quality issues that we need to work through. And again, this is only a generic text note that appears on the section. So it's not a link to the library. It's not a link to a book. Those were technical limitations for the bookstore. And additionally, if there are 4 required texts and only one of them we have access to in the library, it's still just going to show a note attached to the section, not like per individual book. And that's also a limitation of the bookstore system. And just to clarify, our bookstore is an eFollett bookstore, and we've had really good luck working with them on these initiatives. But we can go to the next slide. Now I'm going to talk about how we promote new adoption of ebooks and other library licensed material. So we've been doing this for a long time, offering what we call affordability reviews And it's basically where we sit down with a faculty member who wants to make their course more affordable, and we show them all the different options that exist, whether it's an OER or a library licensed ebook or something else that we can provide access to. But we've started marketing this as more of a formal service that we provide to faculty. So we promote this through email to faculty during Open Access Week and Open Education Week. We do affordability reviews for every participant in the Textbook Affordability Summer Symposium, which is that it's kind of like an OER and affordability crash course that faculty do during the summer. As part of a really big faculty collection survey that Hannah put together last year, we included a sign up for affordability reviews that we had a couple takers, so they got to see what that service looked like. And then we also want to offer this to new faculty and faculty who are proposing a new course. Can we go to the next slide? And so for many of these affordability reviews, it's a faculty saying, hey, I'd like to make my course more affordable. What options do I have? And their course aligns very well with an OER that's already in the Open Textbook Library or OpenStax or some other place where we can find OERs for them. But as we all know, one of the biggest hurdles with OER is that they don't exist for every course, or there isn't a perfect OER that a faculty can find for every course. So this idea of affordability mapping, it's really just breaking down either a syllabus or a course outline or a textbook that you want to replace into modules or sections or chapters, and then finding content that aligns with those individual sections that's affordable, whether it's an OER chapter or an ebook chapter or maybe streaming video or something else. So this template that we use, it can be downloaded and modified at the URL that's provided. It's just a visual way to prepare that review for a faculty member. You start with your content that you've broken out into sections. In the second column, you kind of describe what it is you're looking for, what's the audience that it's targeted at, how, the scope that you have to cover it. Are there specific topics that need to be addressed in there? In the third column, you would list the name and a URL to hopefully a couple options of content. Again, this is like OER chapters or ebook chapters usually, or journal articles or anything else that's licensed through the library. And then the fourth column, how do you use it? That is to let faculty know if they have to permalink to it out of their learning management system or in the syllabus, or is it something that's OER with a Creative Commons license that they can reproduce or modify on their own. And faculty don't usually end up using everything that you provide. It's kind of like almost like a wedding tasting that you're putting together for them, and they get to sample lots of different stuff and then build the menu that they end up using. So now, just want to go to the next slide. We're going to ask, are any other libraries using this modular approach to helping faculty find affordable content?
And while we're waiting for answers, we got quite a few questions in the chat already. So I don't know if we want to take a break and answer some of those before we move on, or if we should wait till the end.
I'll cover a couple of acquisitions things in my section, but if you want to take a break for questions, that's fine with me.
Well, let's see if you can let me know if we're going to be covering any of these. Okay. Do you have a way to know which way the students, I'm guessing, access the book, like whether through SpringShare or eReserves?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Essentially, yes. We can tell whether they accessed it through the master list that I told you about, or whether they accessed it through the individual list for the specific course. And I keep statistics on each of those hits. So you may look at a given course and it may say, oh, it doesn't look like anybody's accessed this, but that means that they didn't access it through the main ECR page. If you look on the other method where they could access it through the master list, you might find that, yes, it's been hit several dozen times in the last week or so. So we keep track of all that. There is a way, I guess, where they could just search for the title on our online catalog without ever looking at the ECR page. And if they hit it that way, I wouldn't be able to tell that way. I mean, I'm sure there are statistics kept by the people who administer our online catalog, if they wanted to, and if it was important enough, they could come up with that data. But I guess our assumption is most people who are nearly all the people who are accessing these items are doing it either through the main portal or through the individual listing for that specific course. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Katie says thank you in the chat. This is maybe a good clarifying question. Do faculty choose their text based on what you have available, or do you have to buy licenses one by one? How many publishers won't create agreements with the library? I don't know if Hannah, you're going to be kind of
I'll
talking
talk
about
a little bit about this, but so I guess I do want to, I guess the main thing is a lot of our early efforts to provide access to ebooks were actually incidental. It turns out we had a really large, or we still do have a really large subscription ebook package, which comes with its own set of problems in terms of maintaining ongoing access to materials. But we were just checking against our current ebook holdings to find whatever we had that matched. So in terms of that, we weren't purchasing anything at that time. We do some focused collection development now, which I'll talk about more. We do buy the titles one by one. And in terms of publishers, we just go through our normal ebook vendor. So we depend on our ebook vendor to navigate that for us in a way. But there are quite a few publishers who do not make ebook. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, who do not make ebooks available at all in our country. And we try to only buy unlimited licenses, but we will match any license type. I guess we are thinking that any access is better than no access, especially for students who don't have the financial means to get access to this content another way.
Okay, so that answers the next question about unlimited user access. So maybe to make sure that Hannah has enough time for her section, I'll turn it back over to, well, Ben, I don't know if you want to finish up this slide.
Oh, no, I will turn it over to my colleague, Hannah Pearson.
All right, let me minimize the chat. Okay, I just want to start off by talking about our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, because it really it changed the way that we approach collection development for online textbooks in our print textbook collection. So we ended up closing completely on St. Patrick's Day 2020. And then students went on an extended spring break for 2 weeks instead of 1. So we had a little bit of time to kind of wrap our heads around what was happening, though, you know, it was pretty hard to wrap our heads around it. And we knew that students depended on the Print Textbook Center for course materials. And of course, there are some textbooks that are only available to the library anyway in print. So we felt like we needed to do something to try and help them navigate this a little bit better. So what we did is we ended up pulling circulation data to focus on textbooks that had circulated that semester. That was important because not every textbook is used every semester. So I didn't want to go in and do matches willy-nilly. So we sent those to our vendor to find matches, and we ended up purchasing 8 titles. So that was a success for us to help try and bridge that gap a little bit. So next slide, please. So now we've kind of pivoted from this reactive textbook collecting to a more proactive collection development process when it comes to adding online textbooks. So what we do is we send a list of ISBNs from our bookstore to our ebook vendor. That vendor matches the titles for us, and then we cross-reference the course and enrollment information for titles with unlimited or DRM-free licenses. And then the subject librarians will, based on that enrollment information, they'll make a professional decision on whether or not to, they'll use their professional judgment to decide which titles to add. Then they'll verify with faculty that they actually do want the textbook, and then the subject librarians will order what the faculty confirm. The faculty confirmation step is I think really important, because there's always the chance that something is actually under an inclusive access program or comes with courseware. So the student really needs to buy the textbook to get the code to access their courseware. So we do try to work with faculty when we are intentionally purchasing titles. If we incidentally have a title, we will still include that, but we wouldn't go out of our way to, we wouldn't buy something if there's courseware associated with it. Okay, next slide, please. So where does this leave our print collection? There's still a demand for print textbooks. We continue to receive requests for print materials once we reopen in a limited capacity. And, you know, I was talking to one of our acquisitions techs, and she says she thinks it's about 50-50 in terms of the requests that we get. And then I just think the publishers don't make enough titles available with the right licenses to move to online editions only for textbooks. You know, McGraw-Hill and Pearson aren't making them available for us to purchase in Gobi. So the nice thing about this is it does, when we do talk to faculty, it does create an opportunity to kind of discuss, you know, what's going on, because I absolutely do pin it on the publishers when they ask why something isn't available. And then in some cases, I can refer them to Mandy and their subject librarian to have an additional conversation about doing an affordability mapping review or moving to an OER. So there's kind of a stepping stone process in place. And I do think maybe one day print textbook centers could be phased out, but it's gonna take a really long time, and there's either gonna or have to be a major cultural shift on campuses to, you know, to really embrace open educational resources, which I do think are more the answer than library licensed textbooks. They're just, you know, a blended approach has been more practical for us. And then this idea of legislation or advocacy to kind of force publishers to license materials to us. And you'll kind of, I think there's some of that happening with the public libraries trying to force fair pricing for ebooks, but you know, we'll kind of see. It's going to take a while. And I think at this point we're done and can take more questions, or we can have some discussion.
Yeah, we didn't get to all the questions, so maybe we'll go back to those. So
I would just like to, I'm sorry, I'd just like to jump in and say that on one of the slides that Hannah presented, it said something about how we closed on St. Patrick's Day 2020. We did, obviously the building was closed, but our library web specialist, Donna Stewart, was invaluable. And as far as making changes to the website and promoting the resources that were still available to students electronically, she was very quick to anticipate questions that may come up and adapt to changes in resources. For instance, when we had extra access to electronic titles from the publishers, within, it seems like within minutes, she updated the website to reflect those changes. And we couldn't do most of what we do with this initiative if it weren't for her help. And I'm sure Hannah didn't mean to slight her in any way, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to point out how valuable she was to this enterprise and will continue to be. Okay, that's all.
thanks, Vern. Agreed. All right, so another question. Are most of these ISBN matches textbooks, or more like monographs that are assigned readings? And yes, I do know what you mean, Katie.
Do you want me to take this one, Mandy?
Sure, go ahead, yeah.
So we do have some textbooks. I think computer science stuff ends up coming back a lot because we have Safari, which is a subscription ebook package that we get through our consortium, Ohio Link. So, but it is a lot of sort of, there are some kind of non-traditional textbooks, like when you don't think about textbooks. I think our history department really likes to assign like multiple things of, you know, like, oh, let's read this book about this part of African history. Let's read this other book about it. But I think it's kind of a win-win that even if you're not necessarily collecting, you know, textbooks, the books that are used for assigned readings are good. Like they're good to have in the collection. They're valuable. You know, even if they don't stay textbooks for forever, you know, I'm never upset to see those titles. So I would say like we're not going to get any of the big textbook publishers making their books available, and it's honestly frustrating sometimes how little is available. But we do what we can. So I hope that answers your question. Like we do get quite a few textbooks. It is a lot of kind of these non-traditional titles as well. But I'm generally happy with kind of the blend that we get through this program.
All right. This is a good question from Nicole. Are you looking to add this affordability to the course catalog when students enroll? Which I don't know if Ben wants to talk about that at all.
Yeah, so our solution with the bookstore is kind of a stopgap measure because we were not able to implement like something into the course schedule or the course catalog that shows that a course has an affordable textbook. And there are all sorts of challenges, like technical challenges to doing that, and potentially like political challenges on campus to putting that information in the catalog. So the bookstore was a willing partner to doing that, and it seemed like their system was finally able to allow them to input information easily, or relatively easily. So that's where we're at right now. But yes, we would like to get that information into a more central area on campus and make it available to students like well in advance so they can make decisions based on that information, like a semester ahead of time or even a year.
I was frankly surprised at how willing the bookstore was to help us with this initiative. When I first heard about it, I'm like, well, why the hell would the bookstore do anything at all that would prevent, you know, them from selling a copy of a book? But they understand more than I thought they would, more than I anticipated they would, that the success of the university relies on, to a large part, on students being able to afford to come here. And if they can't spend the money it takes to buy the textbooks, they won't enroll. A lot of them simply can't afford to do it. And if that happens, then there's no need for a bookstore and they're out of a job. So they were very eager to help us with this. And I think increasingly more so as we developed the program and Ben made outreaches to the staff there.
I also want to mention we have a really great, I'm not sure what her exact job title is, but she's in the administration. She's like the vice president of external affairs, and she manages, you know, contracts for the university. She manages contracts with external vendors for the university, and she has, I think, really done a lot with the bookstore to like make it so we can do these things. So there may be bookstore contracts renew and sometimes universities go with new bookstore vendors. So if you can get your director or someone in the ear of someone who works with the external vendors, you may be able to make some progress in that way, because this definitely wouldn't be possible without the relationship that we have with the bookstore. And if your contract isn't allowing you to do that, you know, that maybe you can work with someone higher up to help you with that, because it is a really important piece of this that is really hard to do. And if you don't have that, you know, it can be hard to get the information in order to purchase the books, or you're legally not allowed to purchase the books. So that can be very difficult.
I just want to jump in. That individual was also on the university's OER committee. So it was, I mean, we've been working with the bookstore before. I think we had an OER committee, but she is really committed to affordability and getting someone in administration in that sort of position on either an affordability or an OER committee seems to be one way to like pull in other departments on campus that might not normally be as focused on those issues.
Yes, unfortunately, she retired like a few weeks ago. You know, it happens. So we'll see what we do next. I know we only have like 4 more minutes. And hopefully we addressed your question, Rebecca. When you first started doing this, were there negotiations you had to work out with your campus bookstore contract? So no, we didn't have specific contractual things. They have a note in their contract. They also have Follett. They're not allowed to purchase required course textbooks in the library, that's a bummer. That's not good. It's made course reserves difficult to maintain. We rely heavily on donated faculty copies. Well, I don't know how much difference it will make, but you could tell them that there's another institution that uses Follett that does not have that contractual issue. But yeah, that's a tough political situation that, you know, either you have to work around it or try to work through it. Yeah. Oh, Katie's also at an OhioLink library. Do you find that most of the things you find are through OhioLink, or you purchase them on your own?
It's a blend, I would say. We do get a lot of things through, we have a really large ebook subscription package through ProQuest that covers a lot. I mean, obviously there are issues with that because it's a subscription package, things move in and out, and that can cause headaches and grief if we don't catch that something moved out in time. But it does give us a lot of flexibility because, you know, people don't use the same textbook forever and forever. But the OhioLink stuff also gives us a lot of flexibility, and there's some really great stuff in like Safari for computer science. And just in general, we do get quite a few matches through OhioLink. So it's been good. We're kind of all over the place. We just patch work together, whatever we can, wherever we can. And that's kind of like the theme of the good and the bad and the ugly is it's a lot of different places and a lot of different pieces coming together.
Well, unfortunately, we've blown through the whole session and run out of time. It's been so excellent to hear from all of our presenters on this topic, and clearly from your questions, it is an area of a lot of interest. I'm sure that all of our presenters would be happy to talk further and answer more questions if you want to get in touch with them. We've put the link to their LibGuide about their textbook affordability program into the chat if you want to look at more details about that and get in touch. And they've also put the link for the slides in there helpfully. Thank you so much to everyone who came today and is participating in the Michigan OER Virtual Summit. And next up, we have our networking lunch. So hope to see many of you there. And thank you again for coming.
Everybody.
Thanks.